All right. Hello, creatives, community, kind folks, and of course, we have classmates and collegiates. Oh, I'm I'm broadcasting in my ear. I apologize. Uh, there we are. I apologize for that because I'm hearing this like really strange echo. Let's get back into it. This channel is RPG with DBJ, and we are here to delve into a subject that we kind of pick for the week. This one, very, very, very generally is called Tech Arcana, not necessarily technology in Arcana, although you could assume that. But really, we're talking about um, extra ignore. Excuse me, extra ignore ordinary events that happen in your world, whether it's magic, whether creatures, or it could be celestial events. It could be something as simple as folklore. It could be the use of magic, psionics, whatever have you. And making that very mundane where the average citizen understands what exactly is going on. Um, in essence, it's the idea that yeah, eventually, maybe we're taking the assumption that your average citizen understands about, the things that and how the world operates when you're using, when you pierce the veil of the mundane, the average to the extraordinary. James brings up voodoo. Voodoo is a perfect example of how a individuals can be skilled in learning how to manipulate the world around them because that is exactly how the law of things that we cannot see affects our regular world. Now, okay, let's get into some concrete things. Also, today is Third Pillar Thursday, and it's one of my passions. And each day we take the subject, I have the little thumbnails that says Tech Arcana, and each day we have a different subject. Monster Monday, we have ourselves a Discord Tuesday, World Building Wednesday. Today is Third Pillar Thursday. Tomorrow will be Future Friday. So, what is Third Pillar Thursday? Well, the third pillar of gaming is exploration, with the other two pillars being combat and social interaction. And combat, well, we know what that is, and most role-playing books have a pretty thick chapter devoted to it. And then we have social interactions, and we know what that is. Whether doing it above board on the table where we talk with each other and talk with the NPCs and have our interactions that way, or we do it with some die rolls. Hey, my character's very charismatic. I'm going to make a die roll and convince the guard or lie to the guard or what have you. But then there is the third pillar, which is exploration. And normally that brings up connotations of going into places unknown, deep forests, dark tunnels, abandoned cities, and discovering things. But it also brings up something else. And it brings up the idea of layers and traps and obstacles and hazards and the physical environment around you. And that is where I feel that although it is implemented sometimes, that I feel like it's a tool that we as DMs and GMs and storytellers can use to really, really enhance the world. So what does that have to do with today? How are the two combined? Well, I will tell you. Now that we've been talking about like everything from folklore to and fairy tales up to things like Eberron and Arcanotech and such, I think we could definitely, most definitely use this to enhance our role playing experiences. Yeah, Deadman says Eclipse phase run properly is 90% third pillar activity and only about 10% combat and social encounters. Yeah, and as a as a backdrop, when I talk about like using the environment, I do consider myself the self-appointed third pillarist. Uh, it is it's not just having an encounter with zombies, as an example, but having an encounter with zombies when the players are on a shallow boat moving silently through a swamp and undead hands reach up from beneath deep dark swamp waters and attempt to capsize their boat. And or it's having not just having a fight with zombies, but doing it on the pier of a dock, and it's being ravaged by a storm, and powerful waves are you know spilling across the docks, and there's a great chance the PCs could be knocked off of the pier into the churning waters, and they see below them on a dock there are hands reaching up, and the undead are about to grasp for them. And it's not just having an encounter, but the location of the encounter. And going to what Deadman's saying, talking about Eclipse phase, yeah, it's not just having a running gun battle, but having a running gun battle on the outer skin of a spinning space habitat, or having, a running gun battle on a space elevator that has a chance of collapsing, or on a starship that's about to with the power out, and it's falling into the atmosphere, and there's reentry trouble as the ship starts to break apart, or it's on a very light gravity world, say on the outer surface of the moon, and the only thing you can hear is your own heartbeat and the panic in your own voice or something. It's the location. So now we have ourselves a world where magic is mundane. So what are we going to do with this? Well, one great thing, yeah, Dead Man says gunfights in Eclipse phase are usually very short. Um, Extensive use of slow motion was probably pretty good. If you're familiar with a director known as John Woo, or even what's the Brian Singer? Yeah, extensive uses of slow motion, because some of these fights are probably pretty quick and pretty brutal. Um, so in our world, let's play with like a Ravnica, or let's play with an Eberron. Even in a world where the world is dominated by the use of and the knowledge of fairy tales and such, what could happen is there may be locations where the amazing meet the mundane. An example would be there could be these wizards' towers that absorb and control and disseminate powerful energies to those who use it to warp reality. And you could have an encounter in the wizard's tower, and there may be bolts of arcane lightning and energy that arc across an energy field where the ley lines meet together and charge the wizard's tower. There could be locations in the world where, for example, there is a city in Eberron that reaches to the skies. And we've seen plenty of artwork, even if you're not familiar with Eberron, where instead of a city being a medieval style city being built out broadly, it's built into the sky. And of course, we love ourselves some floating castles and such. And those locations are very much part of the environment. As a matter of fact, trying to ascend or get into a castle that's floating in the sky in and of itself may be a problem, unless the PCs find aerial mounts or a flying carpet, or are enchanted for a short time to get to this place that's in the sky. And the hazard there may be falling off of the edge, or dangling from the roots, and crumbling earth that's below this floating castle, and the PCs must scramble their way above. Or even that floating land could be attached to the ground itself by chains built by the Titans or something, and the PCs have to climb up these massive chains that are, each link larger than themselves, and climb up to this massive castle. And of course, Oh, he's got to leave. He's got to head out. Catch you Monday. No problem there, man. Everyone is welcome at all times. Sometimes you got to leave class because you have more important things to do. Because life is in and of itself more important than these games. But strangely enough, role playing games are a pretty important part of my life now. And I dare say for some people as well. Now, when it comes to um, I'm going to be very general here, especially for those who are unfamiliar with me and my obsession with the third pillar. So, in fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons, and there are other games that do the same thing, but in fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons, they have something known as layers and layer actions. And for those who don't know or are slightly familiar, there are some creatures, and the creature lives in a location that benefits itself and acts in a strange way on behalf of the creature that lives there. And I find there's no problem with that. So, for example, there's a red dragon that lives in its cave, and flames may shoot up from the ground, or a stone may fall from the ceiling to impact the player characters. But I would contend to you that we live in a world where the environment acts on its own, and those things happen despite our good or our best interest or our worst as well. So volcanic activity in and of itself is something that could be happening in your world. And in our arcane world that's manipulated by people, maybe there are pockets of energy. There could be factories that build golems, and the PCs are in maybe a clockwork factory, and where sharp bolts of electricity and grinding gears and conveyor belts and roboticized arms are lifting and grabbing bits and pieces of mechanical bits, and the PCs must dodge and flip and maneuver their way around this dangerous factory. There may even be like a foundry where there are dwarves forging weapons, and they're pouring, you know, molten ore into forms to make swords and shields and blades and such. But of course, we know that this hot boiling molten ore might be poured on top of someone's head, or traveling across a track over top of the PC's heads themselves, and everyone's wondering, is this the time when the gears are going to break? It's using the environment and making it dynamic, and not linking it to a particular adversary, but having it act on its own. Something as mundane as torrential rain or fog or wind are like static effects that can affect everyone, as well as as well as the fact of, using randomized effects, things falling out of the sky, something blasting up from the ground like a geyser or something, or molten rock. Dead Man Storyteller says, see Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom for volcanic hazards in use. Absolutely. And for me, as your self-appointed third pillarist, I'm really passionate about it because I like I like the idea of placing the danger in the player's hands and then watching them figure out how to navigate it, right? If the PCs are there, the PCs are like, great, I'm going to cast a spell, you're going to throw your spear, you're going to use your fire your arrows, and I'm going to go up front with my sword. And all of a sudden, as the game master, I go, okay, well, I know that's what you might really want to do, but it's the beginning of the round, and we're all going to roll a random die and see who's going to be targeted by molten rock spewed out from the volcano. And that may require the PCs moving from their position, or taking some kind of dodge action, or going, you know what, I'm not going to be able to run up and hit this creature. I'm going to have to take cover behind, something solid or whatnot. And so in our pseudo-mechanical Arcanotech world, those same things could be happening, right? It could be a world where a city is under the control of a arcane defense force, and the PCs may be on the run, and this arcane defense force can, with the wave of a rod, entrap the PCs inside of like a wall of force, or there might be a druidic cult that protects the outer world, and they can bring up walls of earth, or summon an air elemental that sweeps the streets or something. Or there's a goblinoid blue collar workers that use oozes and jellies and such to clean out the massively clogged and eternally clogged sewer systems or something, and are using maybe cattle prod type things with electrical charges on the end to get the black puddings and the gelatinous cubes to move up and down the different hallways to keep it clean, right? And then all of a sudden you throw in the PCs, and the PCs are like what is going on, and how am I supposed to handle this kind of activity? Maybe there is there's a sense that without properly handling it, magic could be Scott Poe says, walked in on cattle prod, and I hope you misinterpreted. Whatever you were thinking, it's absolutely true. So, but the thing is that, as an example, we have ourselves a pit trap. We have ourselves maybe a collapsing ceiling. What are some simple traps? Other traps. There's the bear trap, I believe, is a very common one. There's also the Indiana Jones boulder rolling down the street trap. And I've brought up many times of reskinning and reshaping a lot of these traps, right? PCs need to sneak into a castle. In our Arcanotech world, who's to say that walking down this hallway in the wrong pattern wouldn't elicit an electrical charge, or some necrotic energy, or a blast of thunderous sound or something? If instead of suffering bludgeoning damage from falling into a pit trap, you may step into an area that causes a blast of fire, or you're impacted by frigid cold, or what have you. When it comes to arcane defenses, someone could try to sneak into a magic shop, and if they try to break the window and sneak in without disabling the trap, or using some sort of arcane method to make yourself invisible, maybe you become paralyzed, or turn to stone, or maybe even polymorphed into a small frog or whatnot. I mean, we can play with those things. I'm sure an old hag's dwelling out in the deep swamp, I'm sure she would have her place, filled with glyphs and runes and such. And if you misread them or fail to see them, that one or more of the PCs are transformed into, a frog or a bird, or like a pig or something like that. Something that the old hag could then cook for her meat pies and whatnot. But even our own gaming traits, whether there's magical spells and cantrips, they are the abilities of some of the creatures, turning some of the creatures into environmental styled effects, even taking some of not just the abilities of the creatures, but even reskinning the hazards that we have in our own world. For example, I brought up rain and wind and fog, but who is to say that the world does not have mundane versions, but arcane versions of of those abilities as well. So instead of regular rain, it could be acid, it could be poison, or something that causes a disease if you don't go find shelter immediately. Fog could be any type of poisonous gas, or affliction that you breathe into your lungs. Dead Man Storyteller says, see the entire Exalted system for lots of animated golems used in the setting. And I love myself some golems, because you don't need to. It's the classic hero fighting the nameless robot. It's like PCs can really let loose on mindless animated creatures without having to worry about, well, I really don't want to hurt them because my character's a good person and whatnot. It's like, nah, mindless things. You can throw a ton of them at the PCs and let them just wreck shop and let them feel good about about opening up a can of whoop ass, on those kind of things. But also when it comes to using the third pillar, especially when we have opened up the gates of magic and science and technology, we can place the PCs in realms and in rooms and locations, both man-made and natural, that don't abide by any normal rules, but could still be quite dramatic in terms of where and what the PCs can do. An example would be that I once had players go on a multi-dimensional quest kind of thing, and they ended up on a plane in which the entire plane was made up of 10-foot blocks of stone, very much mimicking a that blue line graph paper that that was a popular thing in role playing in the mid 70s into the mid 80s. And those of you old grognards out there remember buying pads of graph paper and using that to make dungeons on. And I decided to make a plane that was literally made up of these giant squares, and the stone squares would slide and move. They would lift up, they would slide across the ground, they might randomly lift up in the air, they would slide in any of six ordinal directions: north, south, east, west, rising up vertically or going down. Yeah, basically it was Dead Man says, a Minecraft realm? Yes, a Minecraft realm. And mind you, mine was pretty featureless. But the idea was a stone block could literally lift your character in the air and you could be on top of it. One could come slamming down on top of you, or one could come sliding towards you, or two could come sliding together and crush you in the middle. It's even possible that one could push you into an open pit of a stone block and you get trapped inside of like a 10-foot pit and such. And I had a random chart, and each round the PCs had to, okay, so I want to fight the bad guy, but I got to look above me and below me and beside me. And mind you, of course, this would never exist in nature, but the idea is that we don't have to limit ourselves to going like, I don't want it to have rain yet again on top of the PC's heads. We can do so many other things with it, whether it is the classic. I'm going to pull out a much lamb-basted movie, but it actually had something in there. There was a scene in, I want to say, Star Wars. It wasn't Phantom Menace. It might have been Clone Wars or something, where Padme is running in and around a factory and they're building robots and such, right? And if you take that as a gaming thing, you have to watch out for the robotic arms before they grapple you, or you have to watch out for the electrical arc before it zaps you, or the high intensity flame that's trying to melt something into what it should be. And the thing is that there's not only just random events happening around you, but we can also incorporate random conditions that happen, whether you become restrained or paralyzed or blinded or knocked prone or grappled. We can add in some random damaging of, not random, but we can decide that whatever location the PCs are in has some different types of damaging effects, whether it's heat or cold or electrical or sonic or psychic, that happens to Dead Man says that was episode 2, the Clone Wars. Yeah. And it's a far cry from, hey, I'm going to have the PCs fight 3 trolls on some randomized flat terrain that has no impact, or PCs fight a series of trolls and it's a torrential rainstorm and they're on a muddy hill, and at any moment someone can lose their footing. Now, part of me emphasizing using this third pillar of the gaming also means that there are times when your adversaries you're using in your game um, are equally affected by the environment as the PCs. So, yes, PCs fighting trolls on a muddy hill during a torrential rainstorm might also slip and fall and slide their way down this muddy hill. And maybe there are trees and there's a chance of them grabbing trees. James says Superman 3 supercomputer. Um, I'm a little taken aback that you even brought up a Superman 3. But yes, hey, yes, in Superman 3, the supercomputer. Um, we, I am guaranteeing that in your own head canon, there are at least a half a dozen movies where the location had a huge impact on what the PCs were and were not doing and how much fun it was to see it. I bring up, although the movie wasn't as good, the action scenes were great. The highway scene, I apologize. It's I don't have a sneeze button. I'm sorry for that. The highway scene in Matrix 2, um, the idea of the PCs being in a speeding automobile driving down a highway and their adversaries jumping from car to car hood to car hood to get to them, having a martial arts styled fight inside of a car, jumping from one car onto a speeding tractor trailer, or being knocked off of a car and being saved by jumping, landing on top of yet another car and that kind of thing. I mean, it wasn't them fighting their adversaries. It was where they were fighting their adversaries. Um, and Tesla Ranger brings up the highway scene in iRobot. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, there are a number of scenes in that movie in iRobot. And, as we're talking, we're bringing up a lot of science fiction scenes. For example, in iRobot, Will Smith is a detective and he's got his cybernetic arm and he goes inside an abandoned building and someone activates the giant robot that's supposed to demolish the building he's in. And what does he have to do? He's got to run away from collapsing ceilings and collapsing floors and giant robotic arms trying to grab and smash at him, although it was quite random. And of course, he does the run, jump, flip out the window, out the front door, roll onto the ground, and looks behind him and sees all of the damaged property. And in that scene, he's not actually encountering any particular individual, right? It's the environment that he's dodging away from. And the environment allows us to capitalize on those so-called air quotes useless skills we have in our games. Sure, we might have the players have to make navigation checks or investigation checks to put two and two together. We could have a haunted wood in which the haunted trees, like treants or something, are grabbing or snatching or clawing at the PCs unless they can convince the Fey Wood to let them pass by. Tesla Ranger brings up, and in Minority Report, yes, there was the same the same factory dodging, twisting, moving out of the way of things, trying to pin you down as machines get built around and in and around the major characters that happen in Minority Report. But let's not limit ourselves to science fiction, because we're definitely going to talk about that tomorrow for Future Friday. How about some scenes from some of our favorite sword and sorcery stories? One of my favorite that I like to bring up as an example are the Mines of Moria, when the PCs, and I'm saying PCs because we're saying that they're gaming, right? They have to go down the OSHA violating steps in the Mines of Moria because there are never any handrails, right? And they have to go down the ancient broken steps. And what happens? They have to jump across a gap in the steps as they wind their way down this strangely spiral set of narrow stairs. And as they go along, the gap gets bigger and bigger. And of course, danger increases. There are enemies throwing spears or shooting crossbows or something at them from very far away. And at one point, one of the PCs has to, use a help action to get the smaller PCs to jump across an even larger gap, and eventually one of the chunks of stairs, resting on its ancient, a crumbling stone foundation, starts to shift and shatter and break, and they have to time their jump and their leap and such. And again, that's the environment. It's not them having a fight with wall crawling goblins. It's having an encounter with wall crawling goblins while they're trying to descend steps. Dead Man the Storyteller brings up the lonely mountain from The Hobbit, the desolation of Smaug. And there are a couple of scenes from that. I'm assuming you're referring to the one where it's the deep stone cavern where there's nothing but like catwalks and the Tesla's like the Dwarven Forge. Yeah, it's the one where there are like the Goblin King lives, and there's catwalks and rope bridges and cranes and rudimentary elevators and platforms that are moving. I was going to say merchandise, but you understand, merchandise and raw wood and building materials up and around and through this area. And the dwarves have this amazing fight with these in mine carts and falling in and over the sides of rope bridges and wooden catwalks and that kind of thing, where sure, can a player jump across a vast expanse to dangle off of a moving crane arm? Heck yeah. Can someone try to scale up or slide down a long rope that's holding a massive stone block and cut the rope and have that fall? And my answer to that would be a resounding yes. And it sounds complicated, me describing all of these crazy moving parts, but I contend to you that it's no more complicated than adding additional adversaries into like a combat situation, that removing one or two of those adversaries and then placing them into this dynamic location, however you set up your dynamic location, can add more choices, having to add more adding plenty of if-then statements in the interaction with the PCs. Let's see, if my PC stands here, then I'm probably going to get crushed by that stone block that's being lifted by the crane. Let's see, I wanted to open up a can of whoop ass on the troll, but I think instead I'm going to make a choice to move away, and maybe, just maybe, the troll might follow me and move underneath where the stone block is. And me as a game master went, I wasn't even expecting that. Hell yeah. That sounds like a cool plan. I'm a fan of the PCs. Okay. Let me use its 6 intelligence to see if it figures out that it's going to end up getting itself crushed, right? Scott Poe says the newer Conan movie, he fights some guys over a massive grate covering water which contains the dweller in the deep, which goes wild and attacks everyone on the battlefield with tentacles. Absolutely. And sometimes we can reskin some of our encounters with our monsters simply by changing where they're located. So yes, your PCs could be on what I call a green screen, right? Meaning like you could place the PCs fighting an adversary on essentially a location where the background doesn't matter. It just happens to be flat and has zero impact on what's going on, right? They could be in the woods, they could be in a cavern, they could be on a sailing ship, but if it's not, doesn't really have an impact, it's just basically a green screen, so they can fight this thing with tentacles. Or they could be standing on a massive iron grate of which the PCs can't really penetrate, but the tentacles could be reaching up through the metal grate to attack the PCs from below. And of course, all these descriptions do mean that, because I'm hearing what you guys are thinking, right? Because you guys are PCs as well, right? And you're thinking, you know what? Couldn't I just shoot it with my crossbow or arrow, or couldn't I just blast it with a spell? Or if I've got a sword in my hand, I could only hack at the tentacles. I'm not sure if my sword could reach down and poke this massive beast in the eye, because it's kind of it's like we're between a a a very hard barrier that's keeping it away from us and us keeping it away from it. And my answer to that is absolutely. Some characters will shine, others will be limited. And by shifting and changing and having a dynamic environment, it allows the spotlight to move around. And sometimes maybe we might have to, I don't know, that weird thing. Work together as a group to allow those who are limited by the environment to then shine in that environment, right? So, for example, the tentacle creature might be completely immune from being hit because the characters who are within melee range can't reach it through the metal grate. But maybe one of the players is like, oh, I have a way of sneaking you through the metal grate. I have a potion of shrinking. And you could drink the potion of shrinking and slip through the metal grate and then attack the creature on the other side. And then the barbarian that's just about to take a big old swig goes, how do I return to large size again? And like, well, don't even think about that. Teamwork is a four-letter word, DBJ. Yes, it is. Oh man. Oh, you guys are funny. But yes, they're changing our interaction with some of our classic monsters can keep them rejuvenated in our worlds without having to resign to buying yet our third or fourth or fifth splat book of brand new creatures. I brought up zombies and skeletons before, right? Your classic mindless undead. Them reaching through a grate underneath the character's feet, or them reaching over the edge of a shallow boat in a swamp, or undead hands reaching through. The PCs are navigating literally a dungeon with trapped prisoners, but unfortunately, all the trapped prisoners are undead and they're reaching through the bars of this massive prison. And if the PCs don't walk single file down the hallway, their clothing and their items will be grabbed at, and maybe they might even be grabbed and grappled against the iron bars of the dungeon. And again, I bring it up. I'm bringing it up again. I guess maybe I'm beating you guys over the head with it. The push and shove action in 5th edition has been lambasted as being useless, and my contention is it is useless if there's nowhere to push or shove someone into, right? If it's useless unless you can kick someone off the top of a cliff, or it's useless unless you can push your enemy into undead arms reaching for them. It's useless unless you can push them into a tentacled beast trying to snatch at them from beneath them, or kick them over a catwalk, or knock them over a rope bridge, or push them into a robotic arm that's slamming down on their heads, or push them into flames that are shooting out of a flaming statue or something, or push them into a pool of lava, or boiling metal ore in a dwarven forge, and all these kind of things. And again, depending on the results of that, my character who's dishing out 100 hit points of damage per swing might not be as effective as the rogue who leg trips a creature that's got 300 hit points, knocking them into the bottomless pit, right? Sometimes effectiveness or solving a situation, or having along with having a third pillar, there is a third option to it killing me and me killing it, also goes a long way. So the idea of having a fight with those same trolls, but the cave is falling in on itself. We're talking about Arcanotech. So, for example, the idea that a city is about to shut its doors to the dangerous creatures in the outer world, and the PCs must run or scramble or ride their way on fantastical beasts to get into the city that locks its doors with this massive domed uh, wall of force that keeps it protected during the nighttime hours or something. So killing the enemy might not be the objective. The objective might be scrambling your way back into the castle before the drawbridge is brought up and the portcullis gates are dropped and the doors are closed. Right? It is putting other forms of pressure or tension or motivation to get the players to move. If the place is flooding with acid or being charged with electrical energy, or the doors are closing, or like I said, the place is flooding with water, or the place is collapsing or burning down or being absorbed into I don't know, a black hole or whatever. Whatever the case may be, the motivation may not be attacking it and it attacking me, but actually getting the heck out of this location. And it's a possibility that the adversaries themselves may look around and go, yeah, I could stab the adventurers in the throat, but maybe it's better if I scramble my way onto the tallest cavity that I can, because acid is filling up the dungeon or what have you. And again, having an alternative outcome, a win condition that has nothing to do with doing damage. I've said before that if the only measure of success is doing damage, then the only people that are going to have fun are those who dish it out, right? But maybe in an arcane world, you must throw 3 levers in the proper order, or say the proper command word to get the magical MacGuffin to stop doing what it's doing. Maybe there are 3 crystals that you must gather and place in their crystalline chambers to get the golems, the medieval terminators, from going after the party. I once had a very low level interaction with iron golems, and they were carrying around. I kind of reskinned them as clockwork beings, but each of them had a keyhole in their back, and each of them also was carrying a key or hung on a chain around their necks. And so really the PCs had very little ability to stop the clockwork golems, but they could snatch the keys off of the neck of one golem and try to use the key into the back of the other golem to get it to stop. And that was my way of creating an encounter which was more like a puzzle. Again, layers, obstacles, traps, puzzles, all of those things combined together, I think can be very dynamic. I at one point, I remember you guys talking about traps suck because it's like a gotcha, ha ha, I gotcha. It's only fun on one side of the table. Either the GM or DM is like, hey, I got you, and the PCs are pissed off, or the PCs completely avoid the traps and the DM is pissed off, like whatever, right? But traps themselves, whether man-made or natural, can be something that is a threat throughout an encounter. So you could have a pit trap surrounded by a grease spell and people could slip and fall into the trap, or you could have them fighting on a frozen lake, and any moment that they slip or fall could bring with them falling through the ice, slipping and falling through the ice, and possibly drowning. Now, if that ain't a compound obstacle, I don't know what is. But it's not really a gotcha if the PCs choose to go across a frozen lake. The same could be said for like a powerful necromancer has used a ritual, or a cult has used a ritual that's bringing the dead to life, and the dead are one by one scrambling their way out of the earth. And of course, what are we doing? We're setting up a tension generator. 1 or 2 zombies or skeletons, probably not a problem, but the continual spawning of undead, maybe that is a problem, right? Okay, 1 or 2 this round, roll some dice. Oh, 8 next round. We've got 6 next round. Oh, we've got 12 next round. There's more coming. Oh, there's even more coming, right? And the ever eternal spawning chamber, spawning door, dimensional door or something, is a great encounter because piecing together how to figure out how to get out of it, or the time frame that's happening where things start piling more, um e- escalating on the PC's backs, I think is another great escalation tool. Even in this me being diverting away from this vaguely Arcanotech world. Scott says, I did that with rust monsters in one area and an iron golem guardian in another. It actually worked perfect. They fled fled the rust monsters, eventually found the golem, and put the puzzle elements together. See, I I love that interaction too, because on one hand, the PCs are fighting rust monsters. Yeah, PCs fight iron golem. Right, two completely unrelated events. But if the PCs are smart, if the PCs are able to really manipulate your world, right, use and abuse it, then they can go, you know what? We can get the rust monsters to go after iron golems, and perfect encounter. I love that. I love that a lot, and I love the idea of uh, the we're fighting the fire elemental and then go somewhere else where there's a water elemental. Maybe we can have them go against each other and put each other out. The the idea of the mirrored shield holding it up to the Medusa. The maybe the basilisk looking at its own reflection in a pool of water, turning itself to stone or something. And again, the environment is meant to be used and abused. So if the PCs come up with a, hey, can I knock the stones down off the ceiling and cause the ceiling collapse? My answer to that is a resounding yes. If the PCs pass a mechanical trap and realize what, let's say it's a pit trap, or it's a spikes out the wall trap, or it's the classic room, the walls of the room closing in to crush everything in between. If the PCs figure out that if they lead their enemies into this room and get them to step on the flat stone that activates the trap, my answer to that again is, of course we want to do that. And with our Arcanotech styled world, we again could compound some of these traps and such. So, for example, PCs need to sneak into said castle to go after said wizardly council of evil dictators or something. Maybe some of the traps, if they, instead of a mechanical trap walking across the floor and a poison dart leaps out, maybe if they step on a certain path, they become paralyzed or turn to stone or are polymorphed. And maybe maybe there is a room that shrinks the PCs down and slides them down a tube into another room or something. I think that was a trap somewhere, and I can't remember where I saw that, where PCs activate something that shrinks a reduce enlarge spell that reduces them. They slide down a tube and then they return to their normal size, and then they can't scramble their way back up the tube because it's only large enough for their forearm to reach up. But you could have a trap where gates are dropping down, trying to trap the PCs inside of a maze of gates. And if the PCs are fast enough, they can avoid metal gates that are locking down from the ceiling or appearing out of nowhere. There could be squared walls of force that are trying to one by one entrap the PCs from, in front of them, behind them, and to the left and right, and over them as a ceiling. And if the PCs run fast enough or maneuver around this place, each of the walls of force are kind of like following them in maybe a big vast room or something, or any number of events could happen. And remember, if we're talking arcane powers that are given to our adversaries as well as our PCs, many of those people will defend themselves the best way they can, defending themselves with illusions. Maybe the MacGuffin they're looking for is hidden in a castle, but most of the doors and many of the important things are hidden by illusions. So maybe the PCs need to find a magical word or steal a specific ring that allows them to walk into this region and see the illusions for what they are. Or maybe the place is defended by powerful spirits or elementals or shadow demons or fiends or something. And if they in they have the creatures go after them and trap themselves inside of like specific pentagrams, or the PCs are able to navigate this place by finding an ancient map that allows them to go into a region where the wizard's defense mechanisms, um, the wizard is allowed to go into and out of their own domain by using a certain set of patterns or pathways. And if the PCs can find the specific pathways, maybe they're able to dodge and maneuver around the elemental spirits that are under the control of this wizard. And who's to say that you haven't even included some kind of, maybe these powerful creatures have around their necks a medallion, and the PCs put two and two together and go, oh, the wizard is mind controlling them. They're under the control of the wizard. If we can take the medallion off of the creatures, they could be free. And maybe they could be our allies to go after the wizard, right? But they're under the control of the wizard. So maybe the PCs have to grapple the troll first before they could snatch the medallion off. Or maybe the PCs have to somehow convince the fiend to step into the pentagram and then take the medallion off of its neck to allow the fiend to be free and exact its revenge against the wizard, right? All these things, of course, top of the head, how you implement them would be different based on your setting, but oftentimes using a randomizer or using a timetable. For example, something happens every 3 rounds, or a randomizer, something happens on a random round, or the PCs each roll a die. Something happens if someone rolls a 1 on a D4 or a D6, they might be targeted. You could even have a randomized table. Hey guys, we're going to use my randomized table. Roll a D20, and this random effect will happen on a particular initiative count, initiative 20, or in the case of myself, for the cinematic environments, something happens on initiative 10. And so maybe the PCs who have a higher initiative ranking, I rolled initiative 12. Great. Well, you get to act or move or take some form of action to defend yourself before this thing befalls the party. Let's say the PCs are on a Spelljammer styled ship, and they're flowing through a very dangerous nebula where arcane energies are arcing through the dangerous gases, or they're sucked into a strange gravity type void, and gravity is fluctuating, or they're in an asteroid field and random asteroids might be slamming into or going across the deck of this Spelljammer ship. They could be even in an arcane maelstrom that's storm tossing the ship, and they could fly off of the deck of the ship, or struck by a bolt of lightning that has a random damage source. Hey guys, anybody, okay, the beginning of the round, everyone roll a D4, and if you roll a 1, you're going to have to make a save because you might be targeted by a random bolt of energy or something. And someone might go, oh, do I know I'm going to be targeted? And like, yeah, you can see the energies, the ball lightning forming in the sky above you as you are you're fighting your enemies. And you're like, well, can I change my action and instead take a dodge action or find cover or make a run for it or something? You're like, yeah, sure, okay. And maybe you have a randomized table for what kind of damage source causes them. Maybe take a D6 or a D8 and go, okay, let's see. I'm going to write down fire, cold, electricity. I need 3 more. Okay, psychic. I'm going to do force damage, and I'm going to do thunder damage. All right. Okay. So who rolled a 1? And I'm going to roll my random thing for my enemies, and the PCs might, for the enemies, they're going to get hit by the lightning. It's possible. Sure. Okay. Doing that, I think I know I'm talking out the side of my neck when I'm talking about these things, right? It's a lot of chaos. It's a lot of like, whoa, I can't keep track of all this. And so my suggestion is to implement these things just a little bit at a time. And if your PCs are not used to using and abusing the environment to their advantage, have your NPCs use it. Have your NPCs try to walk the characters over the edge of a cliff. Have your NPCs understand that um, have them scramble to lock the PCs into a flooding chamber. And if the enemy gets to the iron grate that's going to lock the PCs down into the flooding chamber, if they get there first, the PCs will be trapped in inside of the I don't know, the flooding pit or something like that. And foreshadow it. You see the troll looks over its shoulder and sees that the iron grate is open in the ceiling. It's going to scramble towards the iron grate with an intent to slam it shut. And maybe one of the PCs is like, wait a minute, can I outrun this thing? You're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make an athletics check between both of you to see who gets there first. Baby? There's two more. I'm sorry, baby. I don't know what happened to the tank. Yeah, we've got a problem with our fish tank, and I think it's something nasty in it. We're gonna have to clean it. But guys, thank you very much for participating in my rambly, not quite on target third pillarisms for today. Guys, thank you very much for joining me. For those who don't know, who are part of who know me on the live streams on YouTube, the audio is also going live. Scott says, good chat, all. Yeah, absolutely. For those who don't know, you can join the Discord over at Fantasy Grounds College if you just want to listen to the audio. And while you're there at Fantasy Grounds College, maybe partake in a class to learn how to use the Fantasy Grounds virtual tabletop as well. And for me, I'm a contributing writer to Critical Publishing. All that information is located below the video in the meat of the video down in the dungeon below. So guys, everyone, have a great one. I will see thee tomorrow for Future Friday. Thank you for joining me. And I'm going to awkwardly